Imagine walking into a situation where everything you stand for is dismissed because of the color of your skin. Now picture this. A confident black woman, calm and composed, goes about her day, only to find herself targeted by an angry police officer. The officer, whose badge seems to give him a false sense of unchecked power, makes assumptions about who she is before even hearing her speak. The scene unfolds quickly, a tense encounter in a public space, with bystanders unsure of how to react. The officer's tone is aggressive, his behavior unprofessional, and his actions escalating by the second. The woman, holding her ground, remains composed, refusing to bow to his baseless accusations. She tries to explain herself, but it's clear the officer isn't interested in listening. He sees only what his bias tells him, a stereotype, not a person. But here's where the story takes a turn he never saw coming. What he doesn't know is that this woman isn't just anybody. She's someone who outranks him by miles, someone with a history of serving her community at the highest level. What happens when his assumptions come crashing down? How will he react when he discovers the truth about her identity? Stay tuned to see justice take an unexpected and unforgettable twist. The officer's voice grew louder, and the crowd around them grew more uneasy. Some pulled out their phones, recording the interaction, while others exchanged nervous glances. The woman stood firm, her expression calm but unmistakably annoyed. She wasn't intimidated by his aggression, and that seemed to fuel his frustration even more. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" she asked, her tone steady, her gaze unwavering. Her words carried weight, but the officer only smirked, brushing them off as empty defiance. He demanded identification, reaching for her arm when she didn't immediately comply. The crowd gasped, but the woman didn't flinch. What the officer didn't realize was that every move he made was digging him deeper into a hole. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a test of character, one he was failing miserably. The woman, though composed, couldn't ignore the sharp pang of disbelief and frustration swelling within her. How often had she seen this kind of behavior? How many times had she worked tirelessly to fight this exact kind of abuse of power? But she stayed silent, waiting for the right moment. She reached for her wallet, moving deliberately. The officer, still oblivious, prepared for a routine arrest. But what he saw next stopped him cold, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. The officer's eyes darted to the badge she had pulled from her wallet. It wasn't the kind of identification he had been expecting. Instead of a driver's license, he was staring at an official ID with bold lettering and an emblem that spoke volumes. She was no ordinary citizen. She was a high-ranking captain in law enforcement, a fact that hit him like a ton of bricks. For a moment, he froze, his face betraying a mix of shock, embarrassment, and panic. The crowd, sensing the shift in energy, leaned in closer, their murmurs growing louder. Someone whispered, "She's a captain," and the realization rippled through the bystanders. The woman didn't gloat or raise her voice. Instead, she fixed him with a calm but piercing stare. "Now, officer," she said firmly, her voice carrying authority, "are you ready to explain your actions? Or shall I take this up with your precinct?" Her words were measured, but the power behind them was undeniable. The officer stammered, trying to piece together an excuse, but nothing could undo the damage already done. His every action, every word, had been recorded by the crowd, and now he was under the spotlight. The tension hung thick in the air. Would he admit his mistake, or would he try to justify the unjustifiable? The stakes were rising, and the outcome was far from certain. The officer's composure was unraveling fast. He tried to regain control, his words stumbling out as he attempted to downplay the situation. I didn't mean anything by it. Just a routine check," he muttered, but his defensive tone betrayed him. The crowd wasn't buying it, and neither was she. "Routine," she repeated, her voice sharp now, cutting through the tension. "Is it routine to make baseless assumptions? To escalate without cause? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like this was anything but routine." The murmurs from the bystanders grew louder, a wave of whispers, disbelief, and quiet outrage spreading through the group. Phones were still recording, capturing every detail, every word. The officer's discomfort was visible, but instead of stepping back, he doubled down. "I was just doing my job," he insisted, his voice rising defensively. "How was I supposed to know?" She held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "You weren't supposed to assume asterisk, that's what's wrong here. And not just with you, but with how this system operates." Her words resonated with the crowd, her calm but firm tone carrying the weight of her authority and personal experience. The officer took a step back, his face flushed, but the woman wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her presence commanding. "This isn't about me. It's about accountability. So tell me, are you prepared to face the consequences of your actions?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone waited to see what would happen next, the tension now at its peak. The crowd, the cameras, and the woman herself were all holding their breath for the moment that would define the officer's fate. The crowd held its collective breath, every eye fixed on the officer as he fumbled for a response. Just when it seemed like he might back down, a voice from the back of the crowd cut through the silence, a voice filled with authority and urgency. "What's going on here?" Heads turned as another officer stepped forward, this one older and more composed, his uniform crisp and his demeanor serious. The new arrival scanned the scene, quickly taking in the tense standoff, the recording phones, and the unmistakable air of something gone horribly wrong. His eyes landed on the woman, and his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He knew who she was. The younger officer stiffened, clearly uncomfortable under the gaze of his superior. "Sir, I was just handling a situation," he began, his voice faltering. But the older officer wasn't buying it. "Handling it? Looks more like mishandling to me," he said, his tone sharp but controlled. The woman didn't miss a beat. "It's not just mishandling," she said, addressing the senior officer directly. "This is negligence, bias, abuse of power." Her voice carried the weight of not just this moment, but countless others like it. The senior officer nodded slowly, his face unreadable. "Captain," he said, addressing her with the respect her rank demanded, "I need you to give me the full story." The younger officer's face paled. He looked between them, realizing too late just how far this situation had spiraled. But before anyone could speak again, another voice emerged from one of the bystanders. "I saw everything," the person called out, stepping forward. The crowd parted, revealing someone clutching their phone tightly, the screen still recording. "And I think you're going to want to see this." The stakes had just been raised. What was on that recording? And how much more trouble was the officer in than he already realized? The senior officer took the phone from the bystander, his expression cautious as he began watching the video. The crowd shifted uneasily, the tension almost unbearable as they waited for his reaction. The recording captured everything, the aggressive tone, the unwarranted escalation, and the moment the younger officer grabbed the woman's arm despite her clear composure and repeated attempts to de-escalate. The senior officer's face hardened as he finished watching, his jaw tightening. He turned to the younger officer, who now looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. "This isn't just a mistake," the senior officer said firmly. "This is misconduct, and there will be consequences." The woman crossed her arms, her expression resolute but calm. "I expect a full report on this incident, and I want to know exactly what steps are being taken to ensure this doesn't happen again. Not just to me, but to anyone." Her voice carried the weight of authority and an unwavering demand for justice. The younger officer began stammering an apology, but she held up a hand. "Don't apologize to me," she said. "Apologize to everyone you've wronged with behavior like this, and start reflecting on whether this is how you want to wear that badge." As the younger officer was escorted away by the senior officer, the crowd began to disperse, murmuring about what they had just witnessed. But just as the woman turned to leave, the bystander who had shared the recording stepped forward again. "There's one more thing," they said hesitantly. "I think you should see this." They pulled up a second video, one showing a different interaction the younger officer had with another civilian, this time off camera, but with similar patterns of aggressive behavior. The woman took a deep breath, her resolve unwavering. "Send it to me," she said. "This isn't just about today. This is about change." As the woman walked away, the weight of what had just happened settled over the crowd. Some exchanged glances, quietly discussing how things could have gone differently if she hadn't been who she was. Others nodded in agreement as she passed, silently acknowledging her strength and composure in the face of blatant injustice. The senior officer stayed behind, speaking with a bystander who had shared the second video. Steps were already being taken to ensure accountability, but for the woman, the work was just beginning. She wasn't someone who believed in simply walking away after one victory. This incident was a reflection of a much larger problem, one she had dedicated her career to addressing. Later that evening, as she sat in her office reviewing the recordings, she felt a mix of frustration and hope. Frustration that these issues persisted, even in spaces where accountability should have been a given. Hope that today's events, and the courage of those who spoke up, might inspire real change. For the young officer, the day had been a harsh lesson, one he wouldn't soon forget. And for the crowd who witnessed it all, it was a reminder of the power of standing up and speaking out. As the night fell, the story wasn't just over. It was a call to action for everyone who had been part of it.